we would meet these folks at the airport, for interviews and stuff, and we would take them into TWA or American Airlines and would take these people. They'd show up with a suit stuffed in a duffel bag, all wrinkled, and many times we would take them to buy a suit. I mean, we would go buy them a suit and help them dress for the interviews and stuff.
In a corporate world where all employees have great leaders with no egos that create fun cultures where people can do their best work, the employees and companies thrive while doing great things for the customers, themselves, and each other.
Well, we know that rarely happens. I'm Jeff Palacio. I have been a leader for over 40 years for every t-shirt size company, from small 16 employees to extra large over 1 million. Please join me while I interview outstanding leaders that will share stories of great leadership and not so great. It will help you become a better leader while poking fun about all the crazy shit that happens in corporate America.
Hi, I'm Joe Deshawn, and welcome to the Corporate Couch with Jeff Palacio. Today, Jeff is interviewing Frank Bonura. Frank started as an information technology recruiter in 1979 with a focus on the contract for hire methodology. Pursuing his passion for executive recruiting, he launched Alternative Search in 1984, focusing on information technology and C-level search engagements. In 2008, Frank founded Franklin Executive Solutions, LLC. He also created the Executive Agent Methodology, which manages the careers of executive operators in much the same fashion that professional agents represent the interests of actors and athletes. At the start of 2015, he became acquainted with many military veterans and their unique post-service employment transition. As a result, he defined a methodology by which veterans can create and secure the opportunities they deserve. You can learn more about Frank at the website for Franklin Executive Solutions at feskc.com. Let's listen as Jeff talks to Frank.
Frank, welcome to the podcast.
Well, Jeff, thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you on. I think you and I met after an introduction from Susan Spaulding, I believe, in the 2014 timeframe. So that was, I have her to thank for meeting you and all the great people you introduced me to. So,
yeah, well, 2014, so going on 10 years, it feels like 10 minutes.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. Actually, anymore, if I think something's been like a year or two, it turns out that it's usually a decade. That's how fast time goes. I'm thinking 2 years ago, and I'm like, no, Frank, it happened 10 years ago. But anyway, no, I appreciate Susan and her introduction to you as well.
Yeah, and in terms of that kind of the time period, I think with COVID too, it made everything elongated. Just kind of, like you said, something that you think is 2 years ago was 5 years ago or
well, you're right. I think about the 70s though, which at this point I've given away my age, which is okay. I don't care. I'm 63. But anyway, but if that would have happened in the 70s, I've wondered many times what we would have done. I mean, the technology of the day was what? Fax machines and voicemail. I mean, I think it would have been like some kind of a Stephen King movie. Thank goodness, for Zoom and the technology we have, because that would have been a lot worse if it would have happened back in the day.
Yeah, I never really thought about that. You're absolutely right. I don't even what would have been done.
Yeah, I guess we would have figured something out.
Yeah, big conference calls. I was in telecom in the early 80s into the mid 90s, and it would have been some kind of conference call bridges, I guess. But you would never have seen anybody. I think I think people had mental health issues during COVID. It would have probably even been worse because there's no professional socialization type thing. So,
but the conference calling that was going on, video conferencing, in that period, I mean, they had to bring in a truckload of equipment. Even it was a huge undertaking to get everything connected and working. And
yeah,
I mean, it wasn't anything like we have today. Well, of course, but anyway,
yeah. Well, speaking of COVID, and you mentioned Zoom, so Zoom has become part of our life yeah, for the last 3+ years since the pandemic began in March of 2020. Um, a question I like to ask every guest is, what's the craziest attire you've ever seen somebody wear on a professional Zoom call, or lack of attire?
Oh, the story I have for you is you probably, this is going to be entertaining. So I'm interviewing a CFO candidate for a search client, executive search client of mine, out of state. We're Zooming. He has a coat and tie on and, dressed very professionally. And when this was probably, well, I mean, and, coat and tie isn't something you see much of any longer. Um, and so this was, probably 6 months into that whole COVID thing. Anyway, the guy stands up to go shut his blinds and he doesn't have any pants on.
Can't make it up, right?
No, a guy standing there in his underwear. Anyway, I didn't say anything. I didn't want to embarrass the guy, but you can imagine we didn't move forward at that point. But I'm thinking, yeah, so that's the craziest story I have.
I love it. I love it.
I don't know if you've heard anything close to that before, but
No, I think you right now you have the prize. Well,
that was a
there was one guest that some guy had just been done working out, and he literally had just a towel over him on the top and no shirt.
wow.
I mean,
That's
those two may be tied. I mean, uh,
wow.
yeah,
Yeah, but guy stands up and he's in his
yeah,
underwear and I'm staring at his crotch. That was
yeah. That would be
pretty
boxers or briefs. What was the?
boxers. Not that I was paying that much attention.
Well, it was right in your,
Boxers.
right in
Yeah.
your vision line. Yeah, well,
I don't, I mean, I kind of, I don't know. I kind of felt sorry for the guy, I suppose, but I
yeah,
didn't say anything, but yeah, so that was pretty entertaining.
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
I find it during the interviews that I do the whole dress up thing, everything. I think it makes you feel more professional, even though it's
It
Zoom and they're
does.
not going to see what's
No, it,
well, you're
yeah,
supposedly
no.
not going to see what's below.
Well, yeah, no, it does. I mean, it helps, the back in the day, right? Dress for success.
That's
I
right.
mean, it does set the tone, I guess, mentally and stuff. You're dressed for a professional engagement or encounter of some kind, so it can help.
Yeah, I love the reference. We're the same age, so I love the reference to dress for success. So there was obviously when we grew up, no interview. I mean, no internet. You had to go to the library to do research
Yeah,
on how to. So in college, I get this book because I'm doing research on what's the best books to read because I have no idea how to dress for an interview and dress for success. I think it was John Malone that the author may be wrong with the title, and that's how I learned to dress for my interviews. Because my dad, who had unfortunately had passed before I graduated from college, he was a welder, union, steam fitter. So we had, and my brother and I were the first generation to go to college. So yeah, that's how you learn to what to do, and got interview books too at the library and all that good stuff. So yeah,
yeah, that was the go-to book.
yeah,
Again, back in the day for dressing, appropriately for well interviewing or any professional encounter.
yep, yes. So you grew up in the Kansas City area, am I correct there?
Correct. Yeah, grew up in
So
Kansas City.
so growing up, what was your kind of your kid and you're dreaming about your what are you going to do when you grow up? What was your kind of dream, Frank?
Baseball.
Baseball.
Hmm.
Yeah. What
Yeah.
you play it your whole uh, early adulthood and youth?
Yeah. Yeah, and had lots of plans for that until my um, high school cheerleader girlfriend got pregnant and then we got married. So there's some personal information for you.
Another first on the show. There you go.
There's some personal information for you, but in those days, if something like that happened, everything stopped and you just got married, right?
Wow, that's
So
great.
that's what we did. Yeah. So, and then my father was in the restaurant business, my mom and dad, and I went to work for my father washing dishes in 1978, 79.
Right.
Um, entering into the generational family restaurant business. My family up until 2001 or two, my family had a restaurant in Kansas City since like 1914, something like that.
Wow.
Many of them downtown that catered to the lunch, the people going to lunch, like Italian Gardens. You probably heard of Italian Gardens.
Yeah, sure.
So my dad had catering to, he didn't do much in terms of dinner. It was all, just for lunch. And then after everybody, you keep talking about back in the day, right? But after everybody ate lunch around 2:30, 3 o'clock, they'd all start drinking.
Right.
And then drink it till they decided to go home, right?
Right.
So I'm in my dad's, kitchen washing dishes, and a gentleman, a friend of his by the name of Maurice Gosnay, who was one of the two founders of a company in town called Information Industries Incorporated, Triple I.
Oh, sure.
And yeah, they're contract staffing.
Mm-hmm.
Actually,
Okay.
Maurice and Gosnay and Bob Spockman, from what I can remember, were the two. I believe they're considered to be the grandfathers of the contract for hire concept. And so Maurice came back in the kitchen one afternoon after lunch was over at the restaurant and said, "Hey, Frank, you want to be a recruiter?" And I said, well, didn't really know what he was talking about, because when he said recruiter, I think of college recruiters for sports. I think of recruiters for the military. And he said, well, I'll explain to you what it is. He said, if you come to work for me, I'll pay you more than your dad does. And I said, well, that won't be very hard. And so, they were on the third floor of the 10 Main Center building
Okay.
downtown. My dad's restaurant was on the second floor. This is 1979, 78, 79. He said, well, just put on a suit and Monday show up and we'll get you going. So I went to Rothschild's, which was downtown at the time, bought me a polyester suit, looked like I was preparing to audition for Goodfellas.
It was not a leisure suit, though, just to be clear.
No, it wasn't a leisure suit.
Okay, just to make sure.
No,
'Cause you couldn't stand too close to flames with a leisure suit on.
Yeah, no, I had a full Goodfellas mafiosa
Oh, nice.
polyester suit, nice and shiny. Went up to Florsham's and bought some shoes to match, right? So showed up that following Monday, and they put me in a room with three other guys and said, see that stack of manila folders? Each one of them represents a PARS programmer. That PARS was the passenger airline reservation system for the airlines, and TWA was a big client of theirs. And so I was tasked with recruiting PARS programmers all over the country to come into Kansas City and work for TWA. And then they ended up closing American Airlines as a client as well. And we'd hire these PARS programmers. They'd go into TWA and American, and the on what was called, it was at the time contract for hire, and they would be an employee of ours for a year. Then they would convert to TWA's or American Airlines payroll.
Wow.
That's what I did. So did that for a while. And then at 24, I became self-employed and started recruiting. At that time, I was recruiting sales support people for technology companies like Oracle, Cisco. At the time, you had Burls and, DEC and some of the others. And then started doing more executive headhunting type searching for senior level executives for companies, and just went on from there. Yeah.
Tell me and the listeners. So you're 1979. You're on basically the early days of really what I'll call the IT slash technology boom period. This is like really the beginning in my mind, because really I
Mhm.
think it really took off in the 80s into the 90s in terms of really the tech stage. That's I forget what exactly when Microsoft started, but it had to be in that late 70s, early 80s time period. And so what was it like? I mean, you were so young, do you even realize, what you're being involved in and being a kind of a pioneer, not only in the recruiting industry and the tech for hire, but just, just in technology in general?
No, I didn't have a clue. I was 19. Yeah, I thought I knew everything, but I didn't really
Right.
know much of anything. No, had no idea. And what we were recruiting were computer programmers. I mean, they were techie folks, right? Writing lines of code and, software developers, applications, developers. And what wasn't it the first Apple computer came out in 82-ish or
Yeah,
something?
82, 83. Yeah.
Yeah, and then in the mid '80s, Oracle became a pretty good sized client of mine.
Wow.
And when I went out on my own at 24, I think Oracle was just Larry Ellison and Oracle were just starting to get their legs underneath them and just take off. But yeah, so that's what but I enjoyed that quite a bit. Never considered myself to be a technology person, but when I left Triple I, those were all programmers. When I went on my own, and what I did there for a few years before I went on my own was searching for sales and sales support people. Dealing with salespeople was much more, I enjoyed that much more than, dealing with the, you know, software developers or the people writing the code. Because back in those days, I mean, the computer that wore tennis shoes kind of a thing. I mean, they really were. They weren't, they were pretty shy and introverted
Right.
folks. And again, I'm not being critical. I'm just saying that's just the way it was at the time. There wasn't like it was data processing. It wasn't information technology or anything like that. It wasn't. They were coders, you know. Period. It was just a very different world. We would meet these folks at the airport, and for interviews and stuff, and we would take them into TWA or American Airlines, and we'd have to take them to. Well, I didn't, but the salespeople or what they called systems engineer managers would take these people. They'd show up with a suit stuffed in a duffel bag, all wrinkled. And many times we would take them to buy a suit. I mean, we would go buy them a suit and help them dress for the interviews and stuff. I mean, they were just, they weren't very engaging. Then when I got into the whole sales thing, that's where I enjoyed that much more because I was dealing with people that were, well, they were more engaging, and that was more my speed. And I went from there into the executive level C-suite of headhunting, and it's been that way ever since, along with the transition services I have. And I was a professional connector for 10 years, and the executive agent clients that I have now, and all that evolved. It's evolved over 42 years,
Right.
but it started in that boiler room kind of a thing with three other guys dialing for dollars, so to speak.
Yeah. So yeah, we're going to get to what you do today and what you have been doing. But I'd love to. Well, first question is the three other people. Do you still keep in contact with, or do you know what they're doing now?
Yeah, great question. Have no idea. These guys had all graduated from college. The youngest guy, I was 19. The youngest guy was probably 30. These were all educated guys. I'll tell you, uh, Triple I was a crazy place, and the turnover was extraordinary because they worked you to death. But I worked around there were a lot of people that really helped me mature pretty quickly because I was around so many people so much older than I was at the time. I learned a lot. I learned a lot. I mean, it's kind of like I got my college and my MBA through working around all those guys at a very young age that had come from nice schools, very well educated, sharp, smart people.
Yeah, that's interesting. So, yeah, because you're getting your college slash MBA because you're working. And did you have a mentor at Triple I that helped
Yeah.
you?
Oh, absolutely. A guy by the name of Dick Mueller. Um, he was from he'd actually come to Triple I through IBM, played basketball at Maryland. Just everybody wanted to be Dick. He's one of those guys, right?
Yeah.
NBA, yeah, crazy. He was my primary mentor through that and that through most of my life.
Wow.
Tremendous guy. Left there, started a company called Multiple Technologies Corporation, and that ended up being acquired for like $65 million. I mean, Dick did quite well. Um, but the only reason I got hired there was because Maurice and my dad knew each other.
Sure, 100%. Yeah.
It was one of those things, right? And Maurice knew that I was a very hard worker, and I was usually the first one in and the last one to leave, that kind of thing. I mean, there were some weekends I actually spent the night there
Wow.
working, recruiting PARS programmers for special projects, they called it. And there were times, I mean, there were a couple of times we actually stayed over. I mean, it was a crazy place.
Wow. So it's not like today where you can use LinkedIn or Sales Navigator or if you really have a lot of money corporately, Zoom Info. How did you get leads? I mean, obviously it had to be phone, but what was that? What was that process like?
Well, we would call into there were I think like 42 PARS installations across the world, maybe the country, but I think across the world. And actually Bank of America ended up using they took that PARS ACP, that operating system, and now they renamed it Transaction Processing Facility. So because it was for the reservations for the airlines, right? And that's a pretty important part of that's the heartbeat of the airlines, right? I mean, that reservation system goes down, you got a problem. And so like Bank of America used the same technology for check processing because of the high transaction processing speed and all of that. I'm not a technology person, but anyway, so we would call into places and through various methods would identify who the PARS programmers are. And then, since we worked so heavily in that area, a lot of people came to us through referrals.
So then you go on your own. So now you're looking at sales recruitment and sales support recruitment. How did you get, I could see you knew where the 42 PARS installations were, so you can kind of target, but now the market's broader. How are you finding the leads for your sales and sales support recruiting?
Yeah, through relationships.
So
Yeah, and for me, I've always defined, I mean, relationships much differently than networking, which anyone that's ever talked to me knows that I consider that to be nothing more than card swapping. So I've always been, focused on, creating and nurturing real relationships. And, most of all of our opportunities come through relationships, right? And so I just spent tons of time identifying, creating, nurturing relationships, creating value for everyone that I could, being a resource for everyone I could be. And that really is what has fed my pipeline for decades.
So what got you into that mindset? Was it a person? Was it a book? How did you develop that mindset?
Well, my epiphany was when I was 24 and I went on my own and married, my wife didn't work and we had two small kids. I mean, at that time, my daughters were what, 5 and 6, and I was needing some deck repair. And so hired a guy through a friend of mine to repair the deck on the back of my house. And it was a hot August day in '84, and I just took a glass of tea out to the guy. I mean, give him something to drink, and we just started talking. And what's crazy is that, I've always talked about how opportunities very often come from the least likely sources. And so, this has been somebody too that I mean, the whole don't judge a book by its cover, right? It's got long hair, missing multiple teeth, tattoos everywhere, didn't look like a professional kind of a person. So we just started talking, and he asked me, he said, "What do you do?" And I told him, and one thing led to another. And he said, "You ought to meet one of my neighbors who is responsible for growing the office here in Kansas City for Oracle." And he asked me, "Have you ever heard of Oracle?" And I said, "Well, I've read about them in Computer World. I don't even know if that newspaper, magazine, or whatever even still exists. But at the time, Computer World was the big data processing
Yeah.
paper of the day." And I said, "I've read about them. I don't know a whole lot about them." Anyway, long story short, he made the introduction, and it changed my life. I tripled my income that year. And I mean, you can imagine the deck business I sent that guy.
Right.
Yeah, and he has since passed, but I remember walking into my kitchen and stopping and kind of thinking about what had just happened. And that was my epiphany. It was like, again, you don't want to judge a book by its cover. Just the interaction that we had, he was looking to do something for me. I did plenty for him as well, and lots of trust there. And that really launched me into the whole thing of understanding, or at least for me anyway, identifying the difference between card swapping networking and a genuine relationship, and the power of genuine relationships and the mind shift. I mean, I just went through a mind shift there I haven't made a traditional sales call in decades. I haven't needed to, because I have, these relationships of mine that have become even much more than a relationship, a banner waiver. I have an army of banner waivers out there that keep my pipeline rich with opportunities professionally, but really those have created personal opportunities for me as well. And for me, it's always been about the relationship, and not you can't fake sincerity for very long. I mean, there are some people out there that pretend to get relationships, and there are others that demonstrate that they get relationships. And a genuine relationship is not about quid pro quo or keeping score or free diamond necklace with every test drive, right? So, yeah, I mean, that was my epiphany.
Yeah, I think the difference for me, and I totally agree in terms of your networking and relationships. I mean, relationships are about, what can I do to help you, and it's built on trust, and you just can't, as Andre Davis, who you and I both know, Andre has a great analogy. You're dating your significant other. It's the first date. You don't have a wedding ring in your pocket and say, when the lunch or the dinner or the coffee is over, hey, this went really well, let's get married, right? It's a process over time, and it's like the law of the farm, as Stephen Covey used that analogy. You can't, there's a process to harvest crop or grow crops and harvest them. You can't rush the process, right?
No, but with some people though, you get there much faster than you do with others.
100%.
Yeah. The key though, where I think most have a tendency to miss the boat, is when it comes to nurturing the relationship. Because if you don't nurture your relationships, I think you just end up with a network of strangers, right?
Right.
So, you can go to lunch, you can date, you can, whatever you want to call it, speed dating. But you need to be engaged and nurture the relationship by creating value and being a resource for people. Most often when there's no immediate, when there's not an obvious immediate return for you, right, to serve others. We all hear about servant leadership, but to serve others, knowing that, I mean, personally, I don't worry about business and money and stuff. I know if I do enough of the right things, that's just a byproduct of, doing the right stuff. And the big thing for me is just taking care of my relationships and having a genuine interest in the success of other people and helping other people. And it might be something personal. Look, I learned a long time ago, you do two things for people, they love you forever: making money, help one of their kids, right? And so most of my day is spent at least to try to help as many individuals that I can, because that's just who I am. That's how I'm built. But it's also smart business. I mean, what's beautiful about the whole relationship process is that you get to do for people, plus it's smart business. I mean, it's a great combination.
So you get introduced to a lot of people because of all the people you do have relationships with. Uh, Two questions in that: do you automatically meet with that person because of the relationships you already have with the person that did the introduction? And then two, do you at some point get a sense in during that first meeting with someone that you're probably never going to meet with them again, or do you get that sense, or do you wait and see how it develops?
Well, I meet everybody. Now, when I say meet everybody, today it might be a Zoom call,
Sure.
but I engage with everyone. My only criteria is that they be quality people. I don't care about their station in life or, title, money, any of that. As long as they're quality people, I'll meet with them. I have parents have me meet with their high school age kids. I meet with CEOs and everything in between. And I don't, as long as they're quality people, because I'm of the opinion, anytime two quality people get together, therein lies the value. And like I said earlier, opportunity, like the guy that built my deck, I could have easily ignored him. He doesn't have a coat on or a tie. He doesn't matter. Thank goodness I didn't, and wasn't of that opinion or think that way, because I would have lost out on one of the greatest opportunities of my lifetime, quite frankly. I mean, the epiphany I went through that experience, plus tripled my income that year. Believe me, a 24-year-old guy with a wife that doesn't work and two kids needs that, right?
Right. Yeah.
So, and I had no idea going into that what it was going to lead to. And I will tell you that you never know where relationships or introductions are going to lead. And so, yeah, now, you can't have a terrific relationship with everyone. I mean, you can't, right? I mean, but I think research shows that you can have, a pretty in-depth relationship with about 52 people or something like that. I believe I was told.
Right.
I don't know for myself. And what's funny is for years I've had what I call my top 52. I didn't even know 52 even mattered, but apparently it does.
Right. Right. Yeah.
But I have, there are some people I talk to once a week, some people I talk to once a year. People I have relationships like, like with you, Jeff, or other people. You and I could not talk for 10 years. And when we did talk, eventually it'd be like we just talked yesterday.
Right. Yep.
So, but as long as a person's a quality person, uh, I'll help them in any way that I can, So yeah, it doesn't matter. None of that other stuff matters to me.
Obviously, I've worked with you and you're phenomenal, but and I know what you do. But maybe you could. I think you kind of break your how you provide value to people in three different ways. Maybe you can go through each of those and tell the audience.
Well, I don't want to bore your listeners with an infomercial, but
No.
I'm a headhunter.
Right.
I was a professional connector for about 10 years. I don't do any more of that. I decided not to charge for that anymore. I just use that to nurture my relationships. I have a transition service that's very unorthodox. Anything that I've ever done as a recruiter, headhunter, or the transition platform I offer people has nothing to do with job boards, HR departments, and resumes. You've heard me say, Jeff, I think Webster should change the definition of resume to desperate job seeker. So, and then I've been an executive agent, for a number of years. I've got 5 executive agent clients, and look at that like an agent for an athlete or an actor. I literally manage the careers of these individuals. And so,
How'd you get that idea?
that's what I
Because
do.
I think that's unique. When you told me that you did that years ago, I was like, wow, I mean, that's really, I think, a great idea. But how did you come about it?
Well, I mean, it's pretty simple. I mean, it's 2008, and I'm always looking, for ways to So everything that I do, the transitioning, the agent, the professional connecting, the headhunting is all under that like career type management umbrella. And I've just looked for different ways to monetize things. So the professional connecting, anyone that goes to my LinkedIn profile will see the connector. I always tell everyone, make sure they understand I didn't give myself that designation. In the late 20s at 28 years old, people started calling me the connector. So I monetized it. So business owners would hire me to come in and talk with them about the difference between networking and relationship development, meet with their employees and et cetera, that kind of thing. So, but I want people to know I didn't give myself that designation because that can come off to be kind of cheesy. So
Was there one specific person that named you that, or just a lot of people?
everybody just kind of took hold. People just started calling me that.
Yeah.
Um, and but then I decided, I'm just going to use the whole relationship thing and introductions to nurture my relationships, right? To create value for them. And so the executive agent thing, I love golf, and this is 2008, and I'm watching Phil Mickelson. His agent is being interviewed, and I was just thinking, why can't executives have agents? And so that following Monday, I thought of executive agent, started calling myself that, and got my first client out of Scottsdale. He's still a client. And I've got one in Kansas City, four outside of Kansas City. And that's how I got started. Yeah. And the fact that, my recruiting, my headhunting, my professional connecting, it all kind of like, was part of that executive agent model or methodology or whatever you want to call it. That's what enabled me to do it. A lot of the agents, I don't know so much about today, but in the past, a lot of the agents for athletes and actors were really lawyers, attorneys.
Right. Yep.
I'm certainly not an attorney, nor do I want to be. Yeah, I think there are plenty now that aren't. I'm not really for sure, but anyway, that's how that got started, and I've loved it. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, maybe we should do a movie about, kind of like the Jerry Maguire of business agents, executive agents.
Yeah.
We can call it the connector.
Yeah, well, it's not near that sexy. So yeah, and Tom Cruise is a lot better looking than I am, so I don't think that would go over very well.
That's debatable. You're a
Yeah.
lot taller than Tom, though.
Not by much. I'm 63. I shrink a half inch every year. No, but that's how that whole agent thing got started. I'm just watching him, Mickelson's agent get interviewed, and it just kind of hit me, and there I went. Hired an attorney to put together a client services agreement and letter of engagement, and spent a lot of money putting those pieces into place. And yeah, it's been fun.
So we'll talk about your book, The Economy of One. I've read it, and I think it's like the Bible for job seekers. Obviously you've done it for such a long time, but what gave you the idea to actually write the book, and how do you use it in your services?
Well, yeah. So the workbook, and just to be clear for everyone, it's not a book. It's a workbook that it has 10 modules in it. And it's what I use to take people through my transition platform. But having said that, for years, I wanted to create something like the Economy of One workbook, because I love my transition platform. It's kind of crazy too. I don't know I guess it's kind of happens as you get older. All my revenue that I generate is through headhunting. Everybody knows those fees can be pretty nice. And my executive agent clients, the least amount of revenue comes from my transition service. And it's the thing I love the most. Really, actually, the only reason I charge anything at all is so that people will take it, seriously. And usually if I have somebody's money, I have their attention. And it's a lot of work. I don't have pixie dust, right? And so the workbook, it's 10 modules. And what happened was, about 6 years ago, I was introduced to Fort Leavenworth, and through a very good friend of mine, Jim Tennant. He's a retired Special Forces colonel. I still call him Colonel. He introduced me to Fort Leavenworth. and they were interested. You know, they were having a lot. They had a number of senior officers that were transitioning into the private sector. And very long story short, I was given the opportunity to go in there and work with those heroes, as I would call them, 30 or 40 of them. I mean, these are most impressive people I've ever been around. West Point grads, jumping out of airplanes, chasing terrorists. I mean, special forces. I mean, and Leavenworth is like a war college. It's not like you don't find a bunch of tanks there. I mean, and their pedigrees are extraordinary. I'm glad I didn't have know everything that I know about them now. When I showed up, I would have been quite intimidated by their presence. Rambos with brains. I mean, these guys are just amazing, and ladies. So a good friend of mine, Elizabeth Allen, I think you might know Elizabeth, Jeff. I wanted to do something like this, but I'm not a book writing person. That's just not me. I'm not somebody to put together flow charts and workshops and the documentation associated with all of it. So Elizabeth Allen basically sucked everything out of my brain and stuck it in this workbook. And Fort Leavenworth turned out to be like a lab for me to try this out. And I didn't charge them anything, or I should say, we didn't charge them anything because of, well, two reasons. It's, they're heroes. I want to help them any way that I can. And also, too, they were kind of like in all due respect, kind of like a guinea pig kind of a thing, like a laboratory for me to, put all this stuff out there. And so that's how the workbook was born and created. And yeah, that's how it happened.
Yeah, and just to be clear, I mean, having read the workbook, I mean, it definitely is a workbook, but it is a book. I mean, there's great insight, and yes, you have to do exercises and things like that. But I think people's mind when you say workbook, it could be like a 10-page, 20-page, e-doc, but it's a full-blown book with a lot of exercises in it. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, thank you it's actually 157 pages in the workbook, and there are exercises, and there's a lot of information there, Jeff. You're right. Thank you for saying that.
I know you said something earlier, and I've heard you say it before in conversations you and I have had, but, a resume, just screams desperate job seeker. What do you think about the trend in LinkedIn today? So people are much more transparent that they're in a job search. Like you see a lot of posts with people that say, yeah, I just got, reduction in force. I lost my job today. And they write this, I'm not going to say dissertation, but it's they're usually fairly lengthy posts. It's like, hey, I would appreciate any introductions and things like that, as well as the label on their LinkedIn profile says, hashtag open to work. But what are your thoughts? Because obviously that didn't happen in there was no LinkedIn in the 80s, 90s, early 90s. So.
Yeah. When I'm introduced to folks and I see that on their LinkedIn profile, the first thing that comes out of my mouth is to tell them that they really need to get that off of their profile. I mean, that's like standing out on the street corner holding up a sign saying, I will work for food. The path you take to get a job is a very different path from identifying and creating opportunity. And if you label yourself as a job seeker, that's how you're going to be treated. I mean, people have a tendency actually just to keep you at bay because they don't have anything for you. Most likely, they're not going to sick a job seeker on their friends and their relationships. And the odds are the next engagement that a person has, professional engagement, is going to come through somebody they know now or haven't met yet. But if they're a job seeker, or should behave like a desperate job seeker, people are just going to run the other direction, and they're going to probably end up engaging the traditional methods of mass distributing resumes and HR departments and job boards, and all that creates is lots of frustration and aggravation, and in the end, self-doubt. And I can go on and on about that topic, but if you need a job, to keep your lights on and put food on the table, great, well, go get a job. But while you're working that job, there are many other different things that you can do that won't define you or cause you to behave like a job seeker, that will enable you and help you create, identify, and secure that opportunity that you and your family deserve. So just like networking and relationship development are two different paths and mindsets, so is pursuing a job or an opportunity. It's a mind shift. Those are two different paths. But like I said, you need a job, get a job, but that doesn't mean that you can't put into practices and behaviors that will lead to that opportunity. So that you deserve. But yeah, I think I discourage folks from doing any of that.
Yeah, I think it was both you and a recent guest, Teresa Carey, put in my mind that it causes a lot of anxiety and with people you meet if you're just saying help me get a job, because 99.999% of the people you meet with or don't have a job for you, don't know of a job for you, but they know people, they know companies, they have insight. And so if you change the why you want to talk to them, you just want everybody has their insight, and you don't come off as a desperate job seeker. Even if you have to pay the bills, right, and you want to get a job as quick as possible, it just changes the dynamic of the conversation. So
yeah, well, that's why if there's one thing I could burn into the brains of everybody, one thing, it would be that we're never not in a state of transition. And preparing for that next transition is best accomplished when you don't need to do it. So just do the things you need to do on a daily basis, primarily with relationships and other things, without getting into a ton of detail here, Jeff. Do those things that, that will, pretty much guarantee that you never have an empty pipeline of opportunities to consider moving forward. But to wait for the walls to cave in is really a huge mistake that many make. And I'll tell you, the traditional methods, the real damage that's done is it causes people to question themselves. Am I not talented? Why doesn't anybody want to hire me? What's wrong with me? And there's not wrong. I've never met anybody where there's something like glaringly wrong with them. It's just that they're going down that empty rabbit hole of mass distributing resumes and broadcasting, looking for a job, and that's what they're going to get as a job. I'll tell you that companies like to hire people that aren't desperate. I mean, it's just like when you're younger days, when you were dating. I mean, who wants to be with somebody that's desperate, right? Desperation is not a very attractive thing, right?
yeah, and people reek of it.
What's that?
They reek of it. You could
sense
it when you meet with them.
Yeah, exactly. You turn people off. So it really has a massive impact on how people behave, and it's very discouraging. And you start to doubt yourself, and really, it's the resume mass distributing of resumes and HR departments and job boards and stuff that's creating all of that. Because there's just about every time I can think of, I mean, there's somebody out there that needs that person's particular talents, or can take it, can use their core competencies. And the only reason they don't have an offer or offers in their pipeline is because the people that need them just don't know that they exist, because they're pursuing those desperate job seeker paths of resumes, job boards, and HR departments, right? I mean, relationships is what can drive all of that, and that's really where they need to be spending their time. I mean, there's lots of detail in there,
Yes.
but we're not going to get into. I'm kind of at 40,000 feet here, but the worst thing that happens is people start to doubt themselves, and it's not them. It's the path that they've chosen to identify that next job that's creating all of that. It's not them. So the self-doubt is really debilitating and sad.
In all your years of experience, what's the best question you tell your clients to ask during an interview process?
Yeah, I think the best question that you can ask in an interview of the person you're interviewing with is what you can do in the role that you're discussing that will create the greatest amount of value and impact for them in the role they're in.
Right.
because the people that you meet with, I mean, they all have their own individuals. I mean, if you meet 3 people in one company, all 3 of them are going to have 3 different agendas. So you might understand what you can do to create value and impact for the enterprise, but just as importantly, if not more important, is to know how you can create value for the, say, 3 different people that you're meeting. Sends a tremendous message that you're going to help them be successful, or you want to help them be successful in the roles that they're in. And also too, I mean, how can you position yourself properly with someone if you don't know what's most important and meaningful to them?
Yeah, that's great insight. Frank, you've been a pleasure. You've helped me throughout my career, and I consider you a friend. So thank you for being on the podcast today.
Oh, I've enjoyed it very much, Jeff. You haven't needed me to have the career success that you've had, but thank you for that sentiment, that compliment. But yeah, I consider you to be a great friend as well, and never hesitate to reach out. I'm always here.
All right, thanks, Frank. Enjoy the rest of your day.
You bet. You too.
I'm just so fascinated with Frank Bonura. I just think he's incredible. They call him the connector. He's the consummate relationship builder. Just how kind of random, and I don't believe in randomness, but he gets his high school girlfriend pregnant. That basically changes the path of his life. And then he has this mentality and philosophy. He treats everybody the same because you can learn from everyone. And this guy missing teeth and with long hair that's helping him build a deck or fixing his deck introduces him to the local Oracle GM in the early 80s when Frank just went out on his own. And that changed the course of his life. He tripled his business and just really established himself as one of the primary recruiters in the technology sales space. Joe, what were some of your takeaways with Frank?
Yeah, the story about the guy building the deck was amazing. And it was also crazy. He was working in his father's restaurant, 19 years old, working in his father's restaurant. And it's almost, I know it wasn't quite this simple, but it's almost like somebody just walks in and says, hey, do you want to be a recruiter? Show up on Monday morning and come to work. And that defined the rest of his career. You don't see that happening very often, but that was a career that I was around or been around for my entire life. I've been around recruiters working with Capgemini. And
yeah, that's how you and I met.
And that's how we got
Capgemini.
together finally when I was working for Capgemini and you hired me from there. But I always saw all these recruiters and I thought that's never what I wanted to do because everything that they had to do was built around relationships. And I was never really very good at relationships. But apparently Frank hit it right off the bat. I think the moral of that is that does happen sometimes. Sometimes thing X, whatever it is, happens that defines literally the rest of your life. The one thing that I want to make sure that our listeners understand is that you can't depend on that. You can't rely on that. That should not be your plan. Well, I'm just sitting around waiting for a guy to walk into the kitchen and ask me, do I want a job? But when it does happen, grab onto it and take it because that very may well define the rest of your life.
Yeah, and I do think, and you're absolutely right. I mean, you can't, that's not a strategy. Like, hope is not a strategy. Mm-hmm. But I think, his philosophies is treating all people the same, doing the right thing. It kind of attracted people that could help him in his universe.
He was certainly prepared for it, whether he realized it or not. He was prepared for that kind of life, and it served him perfectly. God bless him. More power to him. That's great.
Yeah. What leadership advice would you want to impart on our listeners, Joe, today?
Well, today we're going back to that great philosopher Dwight Schrute, who one time said, PowerPoint presentations are the peacocks of the business world. All show, but no meat.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of The Corporate Couch. If you enjoy the podcast, I would love for you to take 2 minutes out of your day to rate us 5 stars and write a review. Please join me next week to learn from another great leader sharing their professional journey and insights.